Hey, so in this video, we're going to go over some basic functionality, tools, and kind of, what some of the advantages of using an MPR viewer or a multiplanar reconstruction viewer to look at medical imaging. So here I've brought up, which is basically a normal, this is a normal non-contrast head CT. I've got some pre-made. These are by the technologists and scanner, axial, coronal, sagittal reconstructions. You can kind of tell that these are, these are actually pretty good. But sometimes if the patient is like tilted, you may not get great pre-made reconstructions unless your technologists are really good about that. There are, besides helping make sure that these axes are standardized in every single case, there are other advantages to using MPR. And in truth, my workflow now is that basically every imaging study that cross-sectional or anything that's got thin images or anything that I can reconstruct, I basically use that rather than the pre-made images, because we can basically get this and even better using an MPR. So in Visage, there's a number of different hanging protocols. I'm only sharing one screen here. I'm only recording one screen of two, so there's actually another set of images here, but I'm going to focus here just to show you some mechanics. So I'm going to use the compare MPR. This is actually my preferred. Oops, that brought up another set of images. We'll come to that in a little bit, but just to bring in that same set of images, so here is an MPR viewer where we've brought in the thin section images of a non-contrast CT head. Now, you're going to want the thin section, because if you bring in the thick, you'll get this slab artifact, right? So you want as much of the granular thin section data as possible. And there are a couple different things, like for example, you can pick ones that also provide you a volume rendering, but I kind of like the compare MPR. You can actually access the volume rendering down here as well. But I like this because you get one panel that's a little bit larger. So I typically will use, that helps because then I don't have to enlarge by double clicking to see, finer detail. So once you're in MPR, there are some key skills, mechanics, hotkeys to be aware of. You can change the axes, you can see here, by clicking and dragging these things. Slice thickness you can also change here. There's better ways to do that, but this is one option. If you want to get rid of any sort of study annotations, which I've already removed quite a few for to be HIPAA compliant in this video recording, but if you want to make them all disappear, you can press spacebar to get rid of some, and then if you want to toggle the middle of the crosshairs, you can press X. Okay, those are some key things for just visualization. You can let's see. So I showed you changing slice thickness by clicking on this thing. Another less efficient way to do it is to click down here, but that's like that requires visual search and clicking. The best way to change slice thickness is what I'm doing here. Is you hold down the Alt key and you scroll the mouse wheel, so this will actually change the slice thickness without you needing to click on the screen. And then Alt, and then you press down the mouse key and you drag it. You drag the mouse. That's another way. So that's kind of a very quick way. When that becomes muscle memory, it's so much more efficient. I'd recommend you leverage these tools. So break things into an MPR viewer, change the axes, optimize the slice thickness for the area of anatomy you're interested in. I change it dynamically as I look at things. Okay. Now, when you're at a higher slice thickness, anything above your minimum, you have this option to be in an average intensity and projection, maximum intensity projection, right? You can even do MINIPS, minimum intensity projection, and it's very advantageous to be able to toggle these without having to click on the screen. So the default in Visage is Shift T. So I use this quite often. So between, changing the slice thickness and toggling the type of reconstruction or the projection that I'm using, those are the two most commonly used tools that I leverage in an MPR. In addition to like the window leveling, scrolling, all that sort of stuff. That basically covers the kind of most critical tools for using an MPR. I should note that we have a CT up here, but you can do this with MRI images. So like the best would be, say, thin section images. So we have here a post contrast, MP Rage for a brain MRI. So you can do this. You can change the axes. When I'm looking for brain mets, I'll be using medium slice medium thickness MIPS in some cases to look for enhancement. I should note, so like if you compare, right, let's go back here. If you compare the thick reconstructed images, if you scroll through these, you see how they jump. They're bookended, right? So each image draws from differing 5mm sections of underlying data. But when you're an MPR viewer, let's go back to this, and you've got 5mm slices, you can scroll smoothly so that each image draws from a set of underlying data that overlaps from the prior. Now you can also, so that's clicking with the left mouse key and then to get that smooth scrolling, but you can also do kind of book-ended scrolling, or as I like to call it, by scrolling through the with the middle mouse key. So those, you can use a combination of those to slow down when you'd like, and or kind of do a kind of more that more conventional search, or that search that is more typical when you've got the book-ended things. Now, by the way, so back to our MRI. So this is a scenario where the smooth scrolling to look for subtle enhancing lesions or something like that is going to be very helpful. And even if you don't have thin images, in some cases, let's pretend I didn't have reconstructions of the flare. You can bring a flare in and then get some not entirely optimal, but reconstructions. That's ideal to have isotropic thin section, but that sometimes you have to make do depending on the system and availability. In some cases, you can pull things like even things that you would think unconventionally into, like DWI, things like that. So there's incredible functionality in doing that, and you can change the axes. You can get you can do things that you wouldn't normally do. I want to highlight a little bit that this whole set of functions is particularly helpful when you're looking at complex things like, here's a CTA head and neck, and I'm kind of, focusing on neuroimaging or using it as an example because, I'm in neuroradiology, because it to highlight some scenarios where there's incredible advantages. So to using these tools. So for our CTA head and neck for like stroke imaging, we do get pre-made MIPS and oblique images and things in the head and neck. But these are not going to be oftentimes ideal. So let me see if I can bring that up as just to show you. Oops, I don't want that. That's not what I want. I want this one. I'll just show you. So this is good, but you see there's limitations. Like these are book-ended, and you can't change the projections. These are just pure MIPS, right? And this is fine, but it's going to be tough, for example, to like if you're trying to look very carefully at things happening at the skull base or potential findings at the skull. It's going to be limited, right? This is not ideal. There's not that much flexibility. But in an MPR viewer, right? Let's just say you're here, you're looking, and you want a MIP. You just create that MIP, right? And then as you approach the skull base and you're looking at something where the anatomy is a little bit more fine and complex, you can bring it down again, and look and follow, say, the carotid through its petrous portion and into the skull base. And then as you get up into the intracranial compartment, you can make the the slice thickness larger, and then you can follow those arteries in that in a more efficient manner, right? And similarly, in some areas, like for example, let's talk, for example, the vert through and it's like V2 segment, you can and you might want to use the average intensity projection, to get a more to be able to account for some of that complexity. So there are advantages, and you want to play around with these different tools and how they're advantageous at differing in different projections in different areas of anatomy, but leveraging these all together will make you so much more efficient, so much more able to detect subtle abnormality, especially in areas of complex anatomy or places where There's kind of very small, the abnormality can be very small. And all that together is ultimately very beneficial. So I would advise people who have access to these tools to learn them as soon as possible. This is particularly for trainees or people who join new practices as young attendings, to try to leverage these tools. And this is just the scratching the surface. In a subsequent video, we'll talk about some of the more advanced functions that can be done in an MPR. But this is a nice starting place. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and I hope you got something out of this.